let's talk about this story in the Mail, which is extraordinary. The Google Street View murder is the headline. An image of a figure stuffing a body bag into the boot of a car on Google Street View has led to a major breakthrough in a murder case. And this is in Spain, apparently. A Cuban national was reported missing by his brother in November 2023. Some of his remains were found in a cemetery in a town somewhere down near Andalusia. But they've been looking through Google Street View, and you can very clearly see a guy shoving what looks like a body into the boot of a car.
It's absolutely incredible.
This is amazing.
You know, maybe I'm painfully naive, but why someone would be trying to dispose of a corpse in broad daylight doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense to me.
I suppose it could be a small sort of village in the middle of nowhere in Spain.
Yeah, wasn't expecting those Google vans with the camera coming out the top and driving around.
It's one of those stories that sort of slightly fascinates me, this, because you do see them driving around, certainly in London, quite a lot. And I've often wondered, and there have been a few court cases about what privacy you have in terms of as an individual. If you're standing in a window, if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or if you're, you know, snogging a woman you're not supposed to be snogging on the street, you know, that kind of thing. Apparently you can get some protection from that, because many people have found that they've actually been registered on Google Street View just walking down the street. Yeah, doing something they shouldn't be doing. Or even not doing something they shouldn't be doing, but just they don't want to be there. Yeah, and I suppose because they blur faces, I think. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're not identifiable in some way, shape or form. So it's, a lot of the time you see these things driving around, it's slightly creepy. It's like they've got a surveillance... sort of a privatised surveillance state, but in this case it's potentially bringing someone to justice. There you go. Yeah, so all round, a round of applause for the Google Street View people, but, you know, I think Tom was right. As a word of advice, do not, as a general rule, try and put a dismembered body in the back of your car during the hours of daylight. Ideally, don't kill people at all. Also, but, you know, that, yes, but obviously that. It just seems a bit uncommon sense. Ideally, he says. You could be in the Labour government. Ideally, you shouldn't kill anyone. Let me be very clear. Yeah, I've been very clear about this. You must not do it. Let's have a listen to some of the stuff that went on yesterday, because Kerry Badenoch's been accused of not being very good at Prime Minister's questions. I don't know what you thought of her performance yesterday, but have a look at this.
Mr. Speaker, now we learn he is about to give away our hard-won Brexit freedoms. The truth is, they are punching the British people in the face, literally in the case of one of his MPs, and he will pretend that this is about the past. But we all know these are his choices, bad choices. If he's looking for a New Year's resolution, why doesn't he start with telling the truth?
I'll do it now. £22 billion black hole left by that. Record waiting list with our NHS, who should hang their heads in shame. Immigration completely out of control. Nearly 1 million net migration. She was the cheerleader for all of that. She wants the truth. That's the truth. That's why they're sitting there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm all for it if he wants to start telling the truth. Yeah. Maybe he can tell us the truth about Lord Ali. Maybe he can tell us the truth about why he's decided to go after pensioners and farmers and hard-working families and businesses because they don't vote Labour. Maybe he can tell us the truth about that. You would hope. But I think we'd die waiting if we were looking for him to actually follow through on what he pledges. Absolutely right. The SNP have got an MP called Dave Dugan. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
Before the election, this Prime Minister said he would lower energy bills by £300. Since he took office, they've gone up by £149. He said he would protect the winter fuel payment, but now he's in power, he's stripped it off our pensioners. And he said he lined up for many photos with waspy women, saying he'd have their backs, and he's just betrayed them in the most scandalous way possible. This is now the defining characteristic of this one-trick phony Prime Minister, who says one thing and does another. In Scotland, the SNP are 16 points ahead in the polls. Does he understand? Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt?
They used to ask those questions. They used to ask those questions from this sort of area with very many MPs not so long ago. That all changed in July, and he's now carping from right up there. We can hardly hear him.
Yes, so he's making fun of the fact that the SNP don't have as many MPs as they used to have, without, once again, answering the question. No, absolutely. Or responding to what is actually not a bad nickname in terms of one-trick phony. I can see that. One-trick phony's good. Give that man a job at the Sun. Yeah, we like that. You know, sure also, just on the basis of them doing yet another U-turn, page 22 of the Daily Mail today, Labour has been accused of betraying women by insisting that there is no need to change the law to protect single-sex spaces. And this is, again, something that they said they would do. They would be very, very hard line on it, because there was no place in a woman's single-sex space, like a changing room or a women's toilet, for men to be able to gain access. Now they're saying, watering it down, saying that men who legally change sex by obtaining a gender recognition certificate will have the right to go into women's spaces. Now, again, just because you've got a certificate doesn't make you a woman, I'm afraid, not in my eyes.
Absolutely, and they keep trying to look both ways on the gender issue. Like, they keep trying to say, we've heard you, but at the same time, nothing's really going to change.
Yeah.
And I just think, especially a lot of the women and campaigners and feminists who've made this such a big issue, they're just not going to put up with that, because it is like sex, binary. You can't have a situation where some men are allowed into women's spaces under certain circumstances, otherwise it's not women's space.
Because you've got a certificate and you wave a piece of paper and go, I'm coming in.
It makes no sense.
No.
We divide up spaces on the basis of sex for a reason, for the point of safety, for the point of dignity and so on. You have exceptions to it and the whole thing collapses, as we've seen in recent years.
Exactly right, because the people who will want to kind of, shall we say, take advantage of it are likely to be bad actors, as we like to say. I don't like to use that phrase, but in this case I think it works. You know, the people who are pushing for it are more than likely to be the people you don't want in those spaces. No,
absolutely, and it's not to say that it just, the more loopholes you create, the more they're going to be exploited. This should be obvious to anyone.
Yeah, you would have thought so. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. James here. Disregarding Starmer the farmer, I think he's starting to crack now. He looks visibly annoyed, because normally he comes out with that robotic doesn't he? I will smash the gangs, 22 million black hole. The man is a complete Anyway, Mike, have a lovely Christmas, mate.
Thank you very much, James. He is absolutely that. He is a beep. I mean, it's the best you can do, really, isn't it? Let's talk about water as well, because lots of stories in the papers this morning. The Guardian's got one saying Thames Water gets a green light for bill rises. Apparently today at some point, the industry regulator, which for me is a complete joke, Ofwat, because all the regulators in this country are useless. All they seem to do is pander to the people who make the stuff or supply the stuff, whether it's power, water, you know, education, whatever. They don't really care about the customers. But apparently Ofwat will announce today that the heavily indebted Thames Water, which serves 16 million customers in London and the Thames Valley area, will be permitted to raise bills by just over half the level the water firm had demanded, which means more than 33% over the next 5 years. So you can raise your bill by a third just because you're useless.
And at the same time, they're pocketing bonuses as they did last year in terms of these executives. This is a complete scandal. Everyone has seen through this grift on the behalf of these executives at this point. They've got a natural monopoly over these things. They are constantly failing to properly invest in their own infrastructure. The amount of water they're losing, which is a big part of
billions of litres a day, right?
It's insane. And yet, at the same time, they're still trousering bonuses to pat themselves on the back for the job well done. It's ridiculous. People aren't going to put up with this.
Well, whenever it rains too much, the sewage runs into the sea and the rivers. Whenever it doesn't rain very much, we have a drought. They don't seem to be able to sort of properly manage water at all. The government haven't allowed reservoirs to be built for decades, basically. And I remember back in something like 2010, they were digging up the roads in London, Thames Water, to prepare for the Olympics. And they were saying, oh, you know, some of these pipes have been here since the Roman times, and we're now going to upgrade them all. Well, we're now talking like 12 to 14 years later, and they're still doing it.
No, it's ridiculous. And I just think it's got to the point where it's just indefensible. Something needs to be done, someone needs to intervene, because otherwise, are we just supposed to get used to this mix of higher prices and incompetence? It's ridiculous.
Well, that's what Britain now is, isn't it? It's incompetence ruled by ridiculously high prices for everything. We pay more money for our water, more money for our electricity, more money for our energy, more money for our cars, more money for everything that we have, and none of it's any good.
And it's just all around, whether it's things that are provided by the state, whether it's things that are provided by these monopolies, whether it's things that are just provided out in the market, just people are getting pinched from every direction and getting a worse service for their money.
Exactly right.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Let's get a final voice note in the end of the first hour from Keir Starmer. This is what he had to say earlier when he was supposed to be trying to answer a question in Parliament. Have we got it? He's like that. So you remember that Smash advert with the and then we smash them all to bits. That's what he sounds like.
He's terrible. He's just like a malfunctioning robot, isn't he?
He really is.
I just don't. People used to say, the barrister, great public speaker, supposedly. Whatever happened.
I mean, the idea that the bloke Colin Firth plays in Bridget Jones is meant to be based on Starmer. I mean, they've certainly gilded that particular lily, haven't they? I mean, you might as well say, Hugh Grant was based on Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah. Really? Was he? I don't think so. Anyway, listen, Tom, good to see you. Merry Christmas if we don't see you again.